And first of all, I want to say there's a lot of other states having to deal with reopening at this time. And thanks to our governor and his team, very early on started a reopen committee. I was very proud to chair one of those committees. We were opening right from the beginning. And this governor has shepherded us through this process in a responsible fashion. We took care of our most vulnerable from the very beginning. That's why our pandemic numbers look the way they are relative to our peers. And make no mistake about it, families are still dealing with COVID, right? We have family members still dying of COVID. But you have to ultimately weigh the balance of people's lives and their mental health and the amount of suicides and all of the things that go wrong by locking our citizens down. And this governor has taken the lead right from the very beginning, and he's not hesitated to do the right thing. This piece of legislation was born out of two committees this year. We started a pandemic committee to deal with how did we get in a pandemic? What happens if there's another pandemic in the future, and God forbid, hopefully it'll be at least 100 years, what's the playbook for that? And should we lock down? And should local governments be able to lock us down for many years? We had no concerns with this governor trying to lock our state down. This governor's goal was how do we responsibly open our state? So Senator Burgess, I really appreciate him heading up this committee this year and bringing to attention what do we need to do to make sure that we're ready for the next opportunities with the right PPE, with the right protocol for keeping schools open. So I really appreciate the work of our committees. I appreciate the work with the Speaker and his team as we work through this process, and I'm really proud to be here today with the governor and the rest of the legislature to sign this good bill. And thank you, Governor, for being such a great person in this area.
All right, Chris.
Thank you, President Simpson, and thank you, Governor DeSantis. When you back up a year ago and you look at what was happening in the country, and you can say to yourself, here we went through a 100-year pandemic with the leadership of Governor DeSantis and President Simpson. And when that happened, when the lockdown started to happen, Governor DeSantis' sole mission was to do what is safe for a brief period of time to get our businesses back open, to get our schools back open. And if you remember all the naysayers, it's easy today, right? We sit out here in St. Petersburg, it's a beautiful day, the sun is shining, business is open, but the reality is the rest of the country wanted to keep our children locked away from their schools. They wanted to keep business owners who had spent their entire lives building their businesses to feed and tend to their families, they wanted to keep them closed. And yet here in Pinellas County, the sheriff in Pinellas County, Sheriff Gualtieri, had done a check prior to any of the lockdowns, prior to any of them, to see if businesses were complying with the CDC. And you know what he found? They were. 90% of businesses plus were doing what they needed to do to keep their customers safe, to keep their employees safe, because that's in their best interest as well as it is ours. But Governor DeSantis put together that committee, and President Simpson mentioned that he and I were on it to reopen the state and to do so safely. But we've made a plan as Floridians really since 1992 and Hurricane Andrew to make sure that we're ready for whatever disasters. None of us could have predicted a 100-year pandemic. And yet through all of that, Governor DeSantis comes and says, not give me more power during the pandemic, but says, what if I wasn't the governor? What if it was somebody else? What if we had the government in California and Gavin Newsom was our governor or Andrew Cuomo was our governor? Disney just opened in California the other day. It has been open here for the better part of this year and into last year. Those states are in devastating their economy, they're devastating their businesses and their schools, their kids. I've lost days and months and nearly a year of learning gains during that period of time. That didn't happen here in Florida. But the governor comes and he says, I'm a constitutional conservative. We need to put reasonable checks on government at every local level. Now that we have seen what can play out when this happens for such an extended period of time. And that's what this bill does. Senator Burgess and Chairman Leak, who chaired our pandemic committee in the House, went on a mission at the beginning of session, along with our teams in the House and the Senate and the governor's office, to make sure we looked at everything that happened during the pandemic and put those reasonable restrictions and checks in place. That's what this bill does. It's a response to the pandemic. It makes sure that while we're keeping people safe, we're also respecting people's ability to raise their families and provide for them, that we respect their ability to worship in the houses of worship. Las Vegas opened casinos but closed churches. That didn't happen here in the state of Florida because of the leadership of the men and women behind you. Governor, I'm grateful for your work on this, and President Simpson and all of our team.
Great.
Good afternoon, everybody. Governor, thank you for picking such a great spot. The Big Catch is literally about 100 feet from my Army Reserve unit, and this place is on our rotation for lunch. You know how important lunch is on drill duty? So we'll see you all soon. But Mr. President, I wanted to say thank you so much for trusting me to be able to lead the Select Committee on Pandemic Preparedness and Response. Your sole charge was get us prepared for the next time, when the next time occurs. And so we built this plane as we were flying it. It wasn't easy, but I appreciate so much you giving us that direction, that charge, and having the faith in us to do what we needed to do to make sure that Florida is better prepared going forward. And Mr. Speaker, thank you so much for picking such a great counterpart in the Florida House with Chairman Lee. He's a heck of a guy, and it was a pleasure to work with him. And thank you so much for your commitment on the House side to making sure that we get something done. I want to kind of speak from the heart for a minute, because before I came to the Senate, I was honored to serve as the agency head for the Florida Department of Veterans Affairs under this governor. And nobody could have predicted, after a year of so many great initiatives like Forward March and all the things we were doing to better the lives for Florida's veterans, that this pandemic would strike and everything would stop on a dime. And as they say in the play Hamilton, you know, I was honored to be in some of the rooms where it happened. And I'll never forget, because we run 7 nursing homes in the Department of Veterans Affairs, 7 state veteran nursing homes. And as we know, COVID was like wildfire within nursing homes across this nation and the world. It was ground zero for so much of what we witnessed and what happened to our vulnerable population. And so I remember the day when Florida really had just started getting some positives within our state, and we were reporting that, where our governor said we have to take action now to ensure that our homes are protected. And that seems simple now. A year later, it seems simple that we shut down access to visitors, to vendors, to contractors, and all our nursing homes across the state. But it wasn't simple then. That was a monumental, game-changing decision that protected our seniors. And it's because we have a leader in the governor's office who knows how to make command decisions in the moment, decisions that are tough, decisions that will have a cause and effect. But you have to balance, in a pandemic-like environment, you have to balance what's the worst decision against the least bad decision. And our governor found a way to do that every step of the way. And I am so grateful for his leadership and his willingness to lean forward in the middle of this pandemic and to do things like ensuring our nursing home residents were all tested very early on. That was controversial then. Our governor made sure that happened. And so we did not have the spread that we saw in other states because of the forward-thinking decision-making that we had with this leader to my left. And I know that on behalf of all nursing home residents across this state, Governor, we are so grateful for your willingness to make tough decisions in the moment. There is no playbook for this, but we had a leader in this office who knew how to handle situations like this, and you taught this soldier some interesting lessons, Sailor. So I appreciate you so much. We're grateful for you. Thank you, and just appreciate you.
Appreciate it. I've got a lot to say. Just kidding. Thank you. I want to start by thanking the governor for this opportunity and for the opportunity to be on the Reopening Florida Task Force and for Senator Simpson and President Simpson's commitment to this legislation, and to Speaker Sprouse for the opportunity to serve him on his leadership team. You know, 13 months ago, we were facing a looming but largely indecipherable crisis. We didn't know what was coming out of us. None of us could have imagined that government would order shutdowns of your businesses and force people into isolations into their homes. Just, you couldn't imagine it. Today, what the once novel virus was is less so. We have therapeutics that work. We have vaccinations that save lives. Yet the vaccines that we have today don't have the same proven history of safety as the ones we ask our students to get. Hesitancy is real and understandable, particularly for our minority communities. This is a good reminder. The past 13 months have been a good reminder of the extraordinary power with which we have vested our governments. I'm reminded of what Thomas Jefferson said. The natural progress of things is for liberty to yield and for government to gain ground. And I believe in my heart the axiom that a government that is big enough and strong enough to give you everything you want is big enough and strong enough to take everything that you have. This legislation balances people's safety
and their personal liberties. So what this legislation does is it makes sure that the state of Florida is planning and preparing for the next public health emergency. It funds the emergency response, it protects individual liberties, it limits government actors, and it provides transparency and accountability for those who would take your liberties. And for that, I'm honored to be here and honored to see this legislation signed. Thank you.
So this is quite an amazing event from the bottom of my heart, and I represent about 50 operators in the room, all food and beverage, and you have done so much to save our industry. Is he not the best governor of these states? One of the things the governor saw, and I think, and I speak for all these guys, was when the mayors and county people issued these orders. We were in a state of emergency. We really don't seem to be in a state of emergency. And then those people in those positions abuse that power. In other words, trying to shut us down, giving us citations, giving us fines. I mean, who fines businesses that are struggling? It doesn't make any sense. But you came, you're our savior. Everything you've done so far is going to make us a better city, a better country, and I could not thank you enough. And it's a privilege to have him here.
Great, thank you. Thanks for hosting us. Pete?
Thanks for having me again, Governor. I echo a lot of John's sentiments. We are so privileged and blessed to have you in our leadership. And I know this sounds like, I'm Pete Boland from the Galley and Mary Margaret's here in downtown St. Pete. With the leadership in Tallahassee through this pandemic, it's made St. Pete probably the best place on earth to be doing business. And we're so blessed and so thankful to be here. The governor chose people over politics, and he did it time and time again. He continued to explore the data. You know, Florida has been leading the way in the United States all along this whole time. A year ago this week, we reopened our dining rooms. A year ago this week, people began to have hope again in my industry. You know, and things aren't a walk in the park. It hasn't been the easiest year, but man, we're so thankful, and it's just been a wild time. We won't forget it. Elections have consequences, people. Elections have consequences, and make sure you pay attention to what's going on your local and county levels, and going all the way up into Tallahassee. And man, considering we're still in the midst of a legal battle right now, we have a hearing, I believe, June 6th, to try to commute our mass citations. These things that aren't really based in science, we know now it's not based in science. Things that aren't evidence-based. I mean, it's like bartender 8 p.m., no mask. I mean, when we know there's a zillion loopholes to take down your mask. I think, you know, on behalf of a lot of us here in hospitality, we're excited to put this time behind us. Individual responsibility should rule the day. No one's saying you can't wear a mask. We're just saying you don't have to wear one anymore, right? And that if you want to do what's best for you and your business, that's your choice. And I think that's the way it should be. And that it feels really good to be here in the state of Florida. Thank you very much,
Great.
Governor. Appreciate you.
Ferguson.
Thank you very much, Governor and the panel. Thank you for everything you've done. We're blessed to be in St. Pete in the state of Florida. We live in paradise every day. We went through a hard time last year, but also Tampa Bay was in a great time. I mean, how often do you get the Tampa Bay Lightning win the Stanley Cup, Tampa Bay Rays go to the World Series, and the Tampa Bay Bucks win the Super Bowl? Yeah. We have been blessed. And coming through this crisis we've been in, and gathering people that have been stuck at home, and they want to have a good time, and then you have people coming in from the city saying, you can't do this, you can't do this, you have to do this. We did everything we could. People want to have a good time. Get your shots, and let's keep going. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. So we look forward to signing this here in a minute. I just want to make sure, because no one really mentioned it, but not only does this bill provide protections for individuals, for school children, for businesses,
vis-a-vis emergency orders. It also provides protections for all Floridians in terms of their personal health information and prohibits statutorily vaccine passports. You have a right to participate in society, go to a restaurant, movie, a ball game, all these things, without having to divulge this type of information. And oh, by the way, you give that to big companies, they are going to absolutely try to monetize that. So we didn't want to go down that road. My emergency order prohibited it in the meantime, but then this bill, July 1st, will make that permanent law in the state of Florida, and I think that that's the appropriate thing. And I know many states are now following suit, which we appreciate. So if you guys want to crowd over here, we'll put the John Hancock on a number of these documents. All right. So the first one, today is the 3rd of May, right? All right.
Trace de Mayo.
And this is the bill itself, passed by the legislature. And that is now in the books. So we've got that done. Then pursuant to that, it's effective July 1st. So this executive order is an executive order pursuant to that. Obviously, it can't take effect until July 1st, but it terminates and validates all remaining emergency orders from local government in the state of Florida. So, wow. And then, given the situation we find ourselves in, given that the legislature spoke very clearly about this, given the fact that we have widespread availability of vaccines, that the vaccines are effective, I think these emergency orders, in fact, we're no longer in a state of emergency. All that we have to do to deal with COVID, and we're not done with it, that does not need an emergency posture by local government to be able to do. We're going to be able to handle it. People are going to be able to make decisions, and they have the wherewithal to be able to protect themselves with vaccine if they want. So this order suspends the remaining orders until we get to the permanent invalidation date of July 1st.
July 1st is the day I got to go to court.
Got any questions? Questions? Yes, ma'am.
In terms of local government, city council, county commissions who say, we know our constituents best, we know what's best for our communities, what do you say in response to?
Well, I don't think that's I think the question is, what's the evidence tell us? What's the evidence tell us? If we have widespread vaccinations that are over 99% effective, what's the evidence basis to force somebody to wear a mask? Now, or any of these restrictions. Now, we have suspended the fines on this, and so we've protected the people last summer on having that. But at the end of the day, the evidence tells us that we are over a year into this. People can act with normal order, but emergency orders, these extraordinary measures, at this point are not justifiable. And I had mentioned, the states, ours is going away too, but we fashioned our school reopening around the emergency orders. That was basically the main reason why we've kept the state of emergency, because we want to be able to have in-person instruction, but also give the parents the ability who so choose to opt for virtual if that's what they want to do. If we had not done that, then the school districts would have lost a lot of money. So we wanted to work with them, be flexible, and honestly, most of them, almost all of them, responded very positively, and I think it's been really, really good. But as soon as we get through the school year, as soon as we get through, get into June when this bill starts to take effect, we really don't have any more budgetary things to do at this point. I think the vaccines are so widely available. We do have a surplus of vaccines that have built up. The demand has not kept pace with supply, which I had said that a month and a half ago. I said, we're starting to get to where initially the demand far, far exceeded supply. as we did, we were doing 250, 300,000 a week. We more seniors every week. As we got into the end of February, you started to see a little bit of, I guess, the demand catch up with supply, or the supply catch up with the demand. We then lowered the age to 60, lowered the age to 50, and then eventually at the beginning of April opened it up to all adults, or 16 or 18 and up, depending on the vaccine. And I think we really did it in a way that tracked demand very effectively. But now we're at the point where we've done about 9 million folks. That's a majority of the adult population in the state. Most of the people who haven't gotten it are in the younger age groups. We obviously advocate that they do it, but it's really about making sure folks folks get it. They have the ability, though. There's certainly nobody at this point where there's just not enough vaccine to go around. There is enough vaccine to go around. The vaccine data is fantastic. And you have to ask yourself, if given that type of performance of the vaccine, given how great the monoclonal antibodies have done, which nobody ever talks about, but those have done very well, given all that, if that's still, you need emergency powers under those circumstances, then when are you going to be able to move beyond it? And I think that as we're seeing throughout the rest of the country, if cities are banning dancing at weddings or doing some of that stuff, that's just so outside of what would be justifiable based on the evidence.
Governor, are large corporations still able to enforce mask policies, not laws obviously, but policies in their stores? I'm thinking of big box stores. Are they still able to?
So this bill, no, it's a good question. So this bill applies to government action. Obviously, the vaccine passport is kind of a little bit different. That applies across the board. And it's not really restricting business or government on that as much as it's protecting you, saying you have a right to participate in society regardless of that. But in terms of what like a supermarket or some of them choose to do, a Disney theme park, this does not deal with that one way or another. It's simply emergency orders and emergency penalties on individuals' businesses. Now, like I said, we suspended the individual penalties over the summer. We've remitted all business penalties as of mid-March, I think. And then on the next clemency, if anyone has outstanding, we are going to remit even more going forward.
Governor, when will you reopen the Capitol? Do you have it open in advance for special session?
I'll ask Wilton that.
Thank you. And I believe it's actually partially opened already, but I believe we tend to fully open for special session.
Governor, I want to ask you quickly about this broad elections bill. It's partisan, completely unnecessary, but as well as local election officials, Democrats, Republicans say it's completely unnecessary, including the head of the organization over the Florida elections officials. So why are they saying that?
Man, I'd say a couple things. One, when we took action in Palm Beach and Broward, there were people saying that wasn't necessary, but that turned out to be the right decision. They ran very good elections, much better than they had the 2 years previously. If you look at what they did, having these private groups, these Zuckerbucks, come in and spend millions of dollars to administer elections like they did in Pennsylvania, that is totally unacceptable. And so, yes, that didn't happen at the same level in Florida as it did in some of these other states, but that's a reason to take action before it happens. I think if you look at these mass mail balloting, we have absentee. It's something that Florida has done a long time. It's popular, although, it's fell out of favor a little bit with Republicans because of their concerns about the mail, but nevertheless, that's a part. But what you don't want is mass mail balloting, and so I think they put adequate protections in that. You request, you get. And I think that was the appropriate thing. And then ballot harvesting. Look, if you want to bring your wife or your kid's ballot, that's fine. But to have political operatives bringing all these ballots like they do in California, that is a farce. And we're not going to let that happen in the state of Florida. One person, one vote, not satchels of votes based on whether you're a political operative. So I think we did it right in 2020. We put a lot of effort into that because we knew. And if you think about it, 2020, we did 11 million votes by midnight, very transparent. Everyone saw, everyone was happy. But we also did the March Democrat presidential primary. Remember, there were people saying we should have canceled the election and panicked and let hysteria overtake us. And I said, no, we're going to do it. We trust folks to do it safely. They did it safely. Then we had the August primary. Same thing. Folks were saying, well, maybe we should. No, we're going to do it. We have our system. We did it. And so I think we conducted 3 elections under COVID, did it well. I think these reforms make sure that we're ahead of the curve. But we would not have done the job we did in 2020 if we hadn't taken action early when I became governor, and if I, working with Laurel Lee, as well as the legislature giving us funding, did not really lean into this, because there was a lot of things that could have gone wrong, and I think we did it right. So we're going to be signing that bill hopefully very soon, and I think the state will be better for it. Thanks, everybody.